Hodl, hodl,
Hodl, hodl. Save. Build a. Sound money. All right. And we are live with...
All right. Ugly old goat here, and I've got a special treat today that I discovered kind of almost by mistake. I went on to American Institute for Economic Research and decided, you know what, I wonder what anybody's been writing recently about Bitcoin. And then this guy's called himself at the end of the article as, well, this is good stuff for a monetary nerd. So I said, wow, I got to have this guy on, because he challenged a lot of the thinking that is going on in the Bitcoin world, and you know, we need that. And he also, I just kind of feel kindred spirits, because he wrote a lot of things that I definitely agree with. I get a little bit frustrated sometimes because so many gold bugs never really understood what a gold standard was. And the same carryover has now occurred with Bitcoiners. I make a big distinction between Bitcoin and the Bitcoin standard. The Bitcoin standard will not be Bitcoin, and that's almost heresy in the Bitcoin community. But it's really not, guys, because you know, the gold standard was that. It was a standard. It was not such a thing as 100%. Well, it was 100% redeemability, but it was backed by all the new goods coming into the marketplace, including gold. And gold was the most stable. And so what the innovation of the late 19th century was the market development of the gold standard. Not gold. Gold had always been in use, but what really developed to a stage that never been before is the bankers learned to create non-inflationary purchasing media that would expand as production expanded and contract as production decreased. And so I read Joakim here, and I'm going to let you give a little bit about your background. He's definitely more of a scholar than I am. And he has done, I know you did a lot of work for American Institute, which, you know, that's my mentor is E.C. Harwood. I was amazed that you hadn't read the Lost Art of Commercial Banking, because I kind of send that article to all my followers, say, you know, this is where we got to go. So I'll let you take it from there. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And guys, I hope you've been able to read the article, the latest one that appeared in American Institute for Economic Research. And go to all the links. It's really a deep dive. A lot of stuff you read in Bitcoin doesn't go that deeply. It's just an article on a certain topic. But Joakim actually goes back. He's researching this stuff. He goes back to the original sources. He's showing what other people think, not necessarily. You know, he's well. You're one of those people that was actually. Blocked by Saifedean, right? You told me that yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Half of it. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm blocked by half of the Bitcoin crew on Twitter, and I tend to get into these very unproductive conversations with a lot of them. So yeah, there we are. Officially, I'm a research fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research. And this is the institute that E.C. Harwood founded in the 1930s. So I'm very honored to be part of that. Academically, I have an academic background. I'm originally from Sweden. I went to the UK, went to university in the UK, and I have an academic background in economics and financial history. I did an undergrad in Glasgow, and I did graduate work in Oxford before I sort of decided to ditch academia. So generally, I like banks and I like financial markets. I like the technology of how they work and how they sort of interact with civilization and commercial stuff. I like the topic of money, and I like how monetary arrangements have changed over time. And you can see already how this is relevant for Bitcoin, right? This is exactly the sort of intersection of topics that I really like. Right. So for the last 3 years or so, after I did academia, I had a PhD position at the Origination Mason that I turned down. So I went into the think tank world, and I spent some time at the American Institute for Economic Research. And I've been looking at a few different things. The lender of last resort as an idea that developed in the UK, the free banking eras in Scotland and in Sweden. Some of the topics that I've looked at. Where I think and now I spend my time writing on these topics, and I do a fair amount of editing as well. So I have an editing service on the side, and I help everyone from financial bloggers to hedge funds and their newsletters, and I have a couple of academic clients as well. So my niche for these topics, at least, I think, is that mainstream economists are very bad at Bitcoin, right? They're very bad at the cryptocurrency space. They don't quite understand it, and they hurl accusations that are just really, really poorly made. The Paul Krugmans and the Nouriel Rubinis of the world. But on the other side, Bitcoiners are really bad at financial and monetary history. And here's a niche that I think I found that I can sort of contribute.
Well, where I kind of relate to you in that sense, I found the same thing a little bit. The hardcore Bitcoiners, particularly the developers, they're so much into the code, and I appreciate that. Okay, I really appreciate it. I mean, this is not demeaning the coders at all, because, man, you guys, you built this thing. You keep it, running for us, and we thank you very much. And they are our shield. I call it the Bitcoin standard shields, and that's a wonderful thing. But I sometimes get a little bit frustrated because they think everything's going to be on the chain, and I don't see any way that it will be. In fact, quite the opposite. In fact, my studies, I came to the conclusion at one time I was big on competing standards, and I was, I was trading the shit coins. I had Ethereum, which I sold it all out when I woke up to what was going on. I sold it out at $200, so that shows you how smart I am. So, but before it went up to wherever it went to, but then I went and did a little bit of my own original research, and I found this obscure article that was written by Hayek in 1986, and where he actually, saw that the coming, he called it, in fact, he actually named it what he thought would be emerging would be the standard. So that's the name it should be, because that's what it will be. And that he just saw the standard emerging, competing against the government currencies. And he did not really see it as emerging, at least initially, as cash or anything like that to buy a cup of coffee or whatever. And that's essentially what is emerging today. And in my view, and this is why I'm promoting, but I think that the next big hope in Bitcoin is going to be the development of rediscovering that lost art of commercial banking. And the phenomena, it's not even going to be the Michael Saylors of the world. I mean, what Michael Saylors in the news done some great material. But so far, he's just a big buyer of Bitcoin, which a lot of us, we couldn't buy him the way as much as he did, but we've been in it for a long time. And so the innovation is really what I call there's two kinds of entrepreneurs in the world. Bitcoin is not, we're not going to be banking the unbanked. Most people are unbanked for a reason. There's always going to be poor in the world. But what we are going to be seeing is more and more entrepreneurs that don't have Bitcoin are going to be learning Bitcoin from entrepreneurs that do have Bitcoin. And that what I call this is kind of the new transition. And that's where the growth is really going to be, I think, in the future. But yeah, tell us your view. Kind of give us your kind of elaborate on your criticism of the current thought, the predominant thoughts in Bitcoin right now, and the predominant thoughts the classical guy on gold is Peter Schiff, and he kind of a disappointment. He writes some really good stuff, But he's never given me any indication that he understands what a gold standard really is. Has he? Does he?
Yeah. So right. So first of all, let me just like defend the miners or hedge my. I don't want to come across as like, you know, I learned a lot from them. They're really savvy and they're really holding this ecosystem up. You know, like,
Right.
It's crucial. I don't have a problem with that. It's just that it's not my expertise. I just bring to the table what I sort of.
Exactly. I don't know that, Becky. That's theirs. That's what I say. That's kind of their domain. So I'm not smarter than I am.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But I have a lot of problem with programmers, or not necessarily programmers, but people who are pushing Bitcoin. Let's call them Bitcoin maximalists or whatnot, who don't understand monetary history or misuses monetary history. And so that's sort of my problem. And what I wrote in this article that you mentioned is that it seems to me that all these, I call it Bitcoin bros rediscovering on monetary past, because they seem to run into the problems that financial and monetary regimes for over hundreds of years have tried to solve and fix. And some of them being, you know, like when you have a main chain like we do on Bitcoin, you want to develop secondary lines, and you want to. So Bitcoin's big problem, which is going to sound like heresy to a lot of maximalists, is that its supply is completely irresponsive to demand for holding it. That's sort of the point, which I found really odd, by the way, if you just want to go down that tangent. Like I found this quote, and this is normal stuff from Satoshi. When he's complaining that, you know, like we can't trust anyone, like all the problems in the current system is to trust, and we can't trust anyone to adjust the money supply. And we also can't program it because we don't know how to make a software know the value of things. And then he went ahead and made a software that programmed the money supply anyways, which I found kind of odd. Anyways, the problem with a fixed money supply is, or a money supply that doesn't change to the demands of holding the money that people want, is that you end up in a very like inflexible situation. You end up where money can't increase. So if you want to compare, for instance, a gold standard and a potential Bitcoin standard, in a first sense, a Bitcoin standard isn't tangible. It isn't a physical item. And so it's harder to confiscate, or it's harder for somebody else to steal, in a sense, physically. And that's historically the problem, right? Like the gold standard evolved into government-run system and centralized monetary regime, and at some point they just broke the connection to gold, and there wasn't really much the rest of us could do about that. That is a much smaller risk in a Bitcoin-dominated world, right? Because you don't really have a government dominating. You can move it across borders without much hassle at all. So that's a definite improvement with a Bitcoin standard. But the thing that a gold standard had, and the feature that a gold standard had, was that its supply was responsive to the demands of people who wanted to use it. So, for instance, in the literature or in economics, we call this at the price level of a gold standard was mean reverting, right? So let me just give a few examples of that, or how that works. So if the price of gold, or if the prices in the average, in the general economy, if the prices in the general economy fall, which is the same thing, which is to say that, sorry, just give me a minute. So if we have a monetary standard based on gold, and prices are falling, so prices is the relative price between goods and services and gold is what we're concerned about. So the purchasing power of gold would increase then. That incentivizes gold miners to produce more, right? Because all of a sudden they can use cheaper inputs into their production, and they can get an output that gets them more goods and services when they bring it to market. So prices falling, purchasing power of gold increases, we get more gold to the market. The supply expands. So what happens then is that, with more money in the system, we get prices coming down again. So the purchasing power of gold coming down again, and prices returning to where they were before. So this is what we mean by mean reverting. And it can happen the other way around too. If prices are rising, which is to say that purchasing power of gold is falling, it doesn't pay miners as much to extract the gold. So they cut back a little bit on their production. They might not invest as much, but in equipment and in new mines and that kind of thing. That limits the growth of gold into the system, limits the supply of money, and that means prices are gonna come down again when the purchasing power of gold increases. So we get this sort of like feedback mechanism from the economy itself. None of this applies for a Bitcoin standard, because the supply, as we know, is completely irresponsive. Every hour, every day, there's a set amount of Bitcoin that's going to be released by the miners, and it doesn't matter how much people want to hold it or not. And so we get into a situation where there's nothing that can really change. There's nothing that can adjust for the changes or the randomness or the shocks that an economy is faced with. This is the sort of big difference between a gold standard and a Bitcoin standard that I think a lot of Bitcoiners are overlooking, and unfortunately, a lot of gold bugs don't understand. The really good part about a gold standard was that it had prices that could come back to the longer run trend. They were mean reverting, which let you plan over long time horizons. You could be fairly confident that an ounce of gold that you have today could buy roughly the same stuff 5 years down the line, 20 years down the line.
And is it fair? Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm gonna jump in here for a second. Joakim, is there any chance you can move a microphone closer to you, or people are saying that your audio is a bit muffled?
All right.
Say something now. See if it's better.
I don't know if this is going to be better. I changed it to
that sounds much better
Much
on my
better.
end.
You're good.
Okay.
Give it 20 seconds for the people on the other end, and they should respond. Yeah, carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
So I have a question. Since you've done a lot of study in free market banking, and of course my premise is that Bitcoin will not succeed without a concurrent development of sound commercial banking. And that people don't understand that really is free market banking, that the market, I distinguish the difference between gold and the gold standard. That the gold standard was the Bitcoin of it was the innovation. We never had it before to the degree that we had it there in the late 19th century. And then once it became so successful, they didn't even know that they created this thing, but they worked so well, immediately they nationalized it, and it's gone downhill ever since. I also kind of, and you're the economist, I mean, I'm a layman economist, but the volatility where we have these 70, 80, and 90% corrections, that's going to continue indefinitely unless we do, rediscover the lost art of banking. And I think we're maybe doing that. I don't know, but we certainly aren't doing it consciously. It's the invisible hand at work. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain. Can you talk a little bit about free market banking and that mechanism?
So exactly the problem, right? That we have in the Bitcoin world, we have a monetary commodity that doesn't adjust its supply schedule. How can we get out of that? By adding a secondary layer on top. And that's sort of what a lot of these are working on. But all that a secondary layer on top is, or something that we could be doing as a secondary layer, is a banking system that uses Bitcoin as a reserve currency, for instance. And now we're very much back in the free banking territories of Canada or Scotland or Sweden in the 18th and 19th centuries.
Exactly.
Using a hard currency, outside money, the gold at that time, as a base, and then on top of that, you issue liabilities like deposits or notes.
I want to throw another idea out that maybe you'll get, because I'm examining this and kind of have trouble with it, but there is such a thing as what is the difference between the face value and real value?
Seigniorage.
The seigniorage. And, seigniorage is a very, that was assumed that was actually a legitimate income for the government. They were providing a service for the people, and they actually, as long as they didn't abuse it, it was profitable because you would have a certain amount of coins would get lost, or they wouldn't be redeemed and that kind of a thing. And if Bitcoiners are really our own banks, then there is an opportunity, I think, for seigniorage. And that when we're talking about that, for example, we talk about all these transaction fees. And the one of my good friends and mentors is Jimmy Song in the development space. And he taught me, all these things, we don't need Bitcoin to, develop a cash system. We can do it basically among fellow producers, and producers find out, we're not really good at this. So people that produce say, there's experts at this, bankers that know what they're doing. There is such a thing. When Colonel Harwood, when I asked him, when I mint this coin that says Sound Commercial Banking, and I don't know, I actually have a gold one right here. I don't know if you see, but that's it. And I'm collecting these now because I think they're going to be very valuable someday. And
is this the Harwood coin?
Yes. Yeah, I was the one that made these. Okay. I don't know if you knew that or not. So I have a storied past, but I love sound money, and that's the reverse side. And so not the whole, unlike, and we have like 67 silver coins out here, so we show people the silver gold ratio. But gold coins never circulated as cash. They didn't circulate hardly at all. They could be used in cash. The only time gold ever was used as cash was when it was extremely plentiful, like in California during the California gold rush. That was it.
Yeah. And otherwise, you kind of have to go back to Mesopotamian long distance trade or that kind of thing. But even then, you're mostly using silver. But what we see in the modern world is, or 1700s, 1800s, is paper claims to gold, paper claims circulating on top of a gold standard.
Yeah,
and then redeemable at banks.
What I like about your writing and what you're doing is what I see sometimes. There's too much of a clash between some of the old gold bugs. They kind of make it generational between boomers and millennials and all that. But I see the same mistake. I see kind of a pretense of knowledge on both sides. And I see you as maybe bridging that gap, because there's more to this, guys, than having this Bitcoin. There's a big difference between Bitcoin and the Bitcoin standard. Bitcoin is innovation because, wow, it really has the potential to be a new standard. And the idea of bringing stability into the marketplace, that was what the bankers learned. That's what they did. And they call it, I think now, self-liquidating commercial paper. But right now, that's only a small aspect of what the corruption that we have in our banking system now. But anyway, I'll take it up. Tell us a little bit about free market banking, and why that's going to be important to Bitcoin, or why it's important at all.
So when I wrote my first article on Bitcoin, maybe 3.5 years ago or so, there wasn't really too much lending going on. It was mostly this, mania around a new and fascinating monetary system, and the Fed or those kinds of ideas. And then you have the lingering ideas about, how this is a new peer-to-peer cash network. And I was criticizing it because, there wasn't really a monetary system, and how are you going to compare? There wasn't really a financial lending credit system, and how are you going to compete with a big incumbent monetary system like, the US dollar or the euro that have very, very intriguing infrastructures and like well-functioning things now with the fintech boom in the last 10 years and so. We have, in the Western world at least, we have very well-functioning financial institutions to do this, credit, lending, mortgaging, whatever. And that wasn't really a thing in Bitcoin, if I remember correctly, from those years. But now there are lending platforms everywhere. You know, like you have your Census and your HODL and your BlockFi's everywhere, and they're already getting into the credit stuff. So far as I understand, they're not really doing fractional reserves on it, but it's a very small step. And I mean, in long history, like this is just a couple of years, right? Like give them time, and they will develop this infrastructure, and they will. I'm convinced that they will turn into the goldsmith bankers of the 1600s and the 1700s, and they will rediscover the efficiency gains of that system, and they will learn exactly what the bankers of ages past understood then. And to get back to the Harwood article that you talk about, the lost art of commercial banking, what he says is he has this beautiful quote, right, when he's talking about the gold standards and people who want to get back to 100% reserve currency, and it doesn't really work, right?
No, he was very critical of that. I called, I don't know if I told you this story, but I wrote an article way back in 1980, or I think it was. I read Murray Rothbard's The Case for $100% Dollar, and I reviewed the book, and I called Murray Rothbard a gold socialist, and apparently that. Yeah. That we were a real small group back then, believe me, not like it is now, but it hit all the right circles. I get this letter from the Hoover Institution from Milton Friedman. I said, I read your article. So that's when Milton Friedman contacted me. And but it was just, there's a lot of debate on that. And I'm not a monetarist. And Harwood was, that's the other thing. He was a sound money advocate. His goal was, if gold sound money, we'll go with gold. Yeah. But it's really would be curious, what he would be thinking of Bitcoin now, along with Hayek and Friedman. Guys, we need to build on the shoulders of these giants and not think we have it all, because this has been going on a long time, and these guys built the foundation that we're running on now. So we don't want to forget, where we've been, and we need to that's why I think the gold standard, re-examining the gold standard is going to be very important if we're going to be successful in a Bitcoin standard. I just really
so let me just read from Harvard. I find this really cool. When he is this is the article that we're talking about, the lost part of commercial banking. When he says, so even the most ardent advocates of sound money, of the gold standard, of a useful accounting system, don't seem to realize that until the lost art of commercial banking is revived and generally applied, there can be no hope for the money credit system of Western civilization. That's exactly.
But boy, it's heresy in the Bitcoin world. It really is. It's just heretical. And so I kind of laughed. I really laughed when Saifedean blocked it, because I go to review his book, and but his book was just great, but he didn't address that issue. But the purpose wasn't that issue. But I get it. There's a knee-jerk reaction, once you start talking. And I don't call it fractional reserve. I call it sound commercial banking, the lost art of sound commercial banking, because it does represent new goods coming in. You can create non-inflationary purchasing media that's also retired. And that's what they discovered could be done at the turn of the century. That's why you had this Gilded Age. And they kind of walked into it because everybody was producing so much. Well, how do we move all these things around? And it was a big problem. The American Express was a big company back then. They figured it out through the railroads and attached these bill of ladings on everything. And they got so good, the government finally nationalized it. They said, you can't, that's like being the post office. So there's I don't know if you've ever read the early history of American Express, but it's a pretty good story.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what happens there, what's really interesting is, so I say something like free banking or fractional reserve banking, and most Bitcoiners are just like, well, this is the system we're trying to abolish. And you always have to explain that that's not the system you're trying to abolish. Central bank inflation targeting central banks on a fiat standard is very different free banking, unregulated free banks of, or less regulated free banks of, the 17 or 1800s on a gold standard.
Yeah, well, that's why I don't call it fractional reserve because it's really fully reserved. I call it sound commercial banking. I think it's a better term. I think terminology sometimes gets us into trouble, and I would suggest that we use Harwood's phrase, it's sound commercial banking, because it's not fractional reserve. What he's talking about is fully backed. Now, some businesses, some banks will make a poor judgment, but you know what? When the other banks get suspicious, they're going to be pulling out their reserves. That's the way it's always worked.
So let me first just explain what Harwood means by the lost art. And he means basically, from reading this, what I understand he means is what Adam Smith talked about with real bills doctrine. That if you're writing paper money on future goods that are about to go to market or is in the market already, you're not inflating the money supply in any way. You're making a piece of paper that represents the goods that you have sort of deposited in the market and you've sold already. If you do that in advance, it doesn't really matter. And we have a long system of that in Europe with the bills of exchange from basically the 15th century and onwards, where you would write a bill of exchange, you would draw that on a banker, and then you would use the piece of paper as a payment in long-term or long-distance trade with others, or even later on internally, you would draw the Bill of London. It was a very efficient way of moving funds around that didn't involve moving the actual gold. So this is what Harwood is talking about when he talks about the lost art of commercial banking, that commercial banks are supposed to sort of liquefy this real movement of goods that is happening anyways. I would probably push back. I'm more in the fractional reserve banking. Like, I don't think we should be afraid of fractional reserve. There's nothing wrong with fractional reserving, as long as you have like a competing banking system, and that there's the ability to redeem money into outside, redeem funds into outside money, such as Bitcoin or gold. It isn't really a problem because banks can't just we have this idea that central banks are going to print money, or banks are just going to issue as much as they possibly could, and then we're going to deflate the currency. Well, no. Banks can only put notes into the market as much as customers want. If they satisfy the money demand of customers, then the notes are just going to come back to them. We call this redemption, or we call this the principle of adverse clearing in the literature. Because once you... am I still with you guys?
Yeah, you're with us. It's just ugly.
So I'm old. I have to leave. I'm coming back. So I have to go get coffee, and then I have to pee the coffee out. So
never mind. I got confused. So there is no way for an individual free bank to sort of oversupply, and they get punished for it by people who don't want to hold their notes. The notes come back to them. In the 19th century, the monetary people like Thomas Coke or Walter Bagehot and things, they would call this the law of reflux. Money comes back to them. There is no way to sort of overexpand. And you have to, at the end of the day, the thing that you give out willingly to customers, you have to back that with real money when they come back to redeem it. And this only goes sideways, if you wish, when you have a central bank overruling this competition and this natural sort of adverse clearing principle that we have operating there. So I would push back a little bit there, and we don't really need to be afraid of fractional reserve banking. Historically, very low regulated systems without central banks were super stable, and they were doing their banking business and providing the services to their economies, and they were doing it very well. Sometimes banks failed, sometimes they overexpanded, but the fact that they failed is sort of the evidence that the system is working, because creditors were punishing banks that weren't doing what the community wanted to do.
Well, and I think didn't most of the banks fail? It was banks to banks. I mean, basically, if you're in, let's say, Illinois, you're probably not going to take a banknote issued in Kentucky. Right.
And this is the weird thing. So the American free banking history is very, very weird, and it wasn't quite free banking, or it was at least a very regulated free banking. It had strange features where individual states would mandate that the banks had to put state bonds in deposit with them.
Right, charter.
Like a corruption.
Charter, right.
You can make those kinds of arguments. But the Canadian or the Scottish example, or the Swedish example, are banks that manage to sprawl and have branches all over the place. They would manage to diversify. They didn't have this kind of ridiculous mandate from politicians to hold this and that asset in reserve, but still they held lots of reserves. I was looking up an old article a thing that I did on balance sheets of banks in the 1800s, and this is when the Bank of England is already there, supposedly providing lender of last resort services, and between 1860s and the 1890s, commercial banks, they're holding somewhere between 20 and 40% in liquid reserves at any given time. And this is not because, a regulator or a Basel committee is telling them that they have to hold like high liquid reserves. This is because they, in the natural rhythm of their business, they are just serving consumers and taking precautions for the redemptions of the claims that they may face. This isn't weird, and this is how banking worked historically. And if you reduce it, if you go more aggressive, right? If you hold 5% reserve, then you're way more risky, and at some point, consumers might not trust you anymore. Redeem a bunch of their notes, and the bank can't honor their liabilities. So the risky ones get weaned out from the system, and you have a functioning. This is like any other market, you have a functioning sort of.
Well, I think one of the biggest. Yeah, and I think one of the biggest problems is so oftentimes, and you see that in the shitcoin market too, is it's completely misrepresented. To say, I guess I wouldn't have a problem with fractional reserve as long as they're saying, well, this is a fractional reserve and here's a reserve, requirements or something.
That was the case historically. This entire idea that fractional reserve is some kind of like illegal, immoral, fraudulent thing, it's completely wrong. That was always the case. That people knowingly deposited money not for safekeeping as a warehouse service, but to earn interest on that money and like be a creditor to the bank. It was perfectly normal.
Right. But that's what Harwood kind of outlined as the savings and loan aspect, where there was actually two kinds of banking. The one was you'd bring in people would bring in their asset, and it would earn interest on it, and then that asset would be loaned out. Somebody that I'm foregoing buying a car today so I can earn interest. So Joe Blow could go buy his car. He did make a distinction in the Lost Art of Commercial Banking between that feature and the idea of creating money from, and I don't call it ex nihilo because it actually the money creation that he recognizes being non-inflationary, it was always represented by producers, and so as long as you're producing, then you can inflate, and then when the reflection, to me, that's what I see as the regulating supply. I'm not so sure I'm buying into the. You'll have to write about that. I can't grasp hold of because what fractional reserve do you hold, and that's sort of a feature that all and you have like commodity clearing houses, and that's what the banks actually, they were clearing houses. They before the Fed, they had their own clearinghouses.
They had their own clearinghouses.
Yeah.
Clearinghouses are old.
Yeah, clearinghouse has been around forever. That's part of the system. You don't need the government involved to have a clearinghouse. There's no reason why, us as Bitcoiners, we're in business. There's no reason why we have to be on chain to build, and already it's happening, to build credits with one another. It's already happening.
I'm super confident that this is happening. Just leave it time and have patience. This is a new market, and even though the proponents of voicing the loudest arguments here and there might not know the monetary and financial history that they're talking about, I'm pretty sure that the actors, the people who actually run these companies, are going to run into exactly those issues and say, we can actually, we don't need to hold 100% against the outstanding liabilities that we have. We can issue notes if people want to hold them and earn interest on the deposit that we service, and then liquefy the market that way. I think Harwood is kind of right on this, that it is a safe way. It's completely safe. He's right as an attack on the 100% crowd, the Murray Rothbards of the world, and the 100% reserve thing, that you don't need 100%, and it's perfectly safe for banks to liquefy an asset that's going to a market anyways. But we can push that even further, even if there aren't goods that are going to market. If somebody wants to hold your liability and you're a bank, somebody wants to hold your liability, that's a liquidity service that you're providing. That's also a different kind of service. I think in a modern context, I've written about this too, we can think of Starbucks and Amazon gift cards as that. They're not money, but they work as money, and people who hold them know that they can redeem them against goods and services at Starbucks and Amazon, right? Yeah. And it operates, for those companies, it operates as very, very cheap financing because they don't have to pay for it. It's zero interest funding for them when consumers are giving money up front in exchange for a gift card. It's not a new money, but it's fractional reserve financing of the business that they're doing. It's not that different.
No, it's not. It's not a lot different. I agree with that. So it's, I mean, that's essentially what it is, because they have a, they have the capacity to give you the coffee later on,
Starbucks can never run out of coffee,
Yeah. Well, they might someday, the way things are going, but so far they've been pretty good.
They'd be fine, yeah. They can also sort of honor the commitment. If you show up when they're open and you give them a gift card, they can give you a cup of coffee. They have the materials to do it. I mean, it's a slightly bit different, right? If you have a very risky bank and you show up with a note and they're unable to redeem it, that happened a lot in history.
And the choice is
never-ending history of fractional reserve banks.
But the key is to have those choices. And so that's the whole key. So, if you don't have to participate in a fractional reserve system. That's the only thing. As long as they say, okay, we're going to, hold a minimum requirement of this in our Bitcoin, but the rest of it, we're whatever, we're going to do with it. Okay, I can get it. I don't think that's the model that I really embrace. I don't think that's what Harwood was saying. And so I'm kind of in the middle ground there. I'll be curious. You said you're gonna write an article about this. I can't wait to see it, man.
Sure. So I did flesh this out a little bit, the money demand aspect of this. I wrote a long article for Economic Affairs criticizing modern monetary theory, and then I was doing that on the same money demand grounds. That there's only so much money that the federal government can put in the system before it comes back to them in some way. It's like when you issue money, if you're a Starbucks and somebody wants to hold your liability in terms of a gift card, or you're the Federal Reserve and you issue money, if nobody wants to hold that money, how do they get rid of it? In the Starbucks case, you go to Starbucks, you redeem it for real goods and services. In the Federal Reserve version, you can't go to the Federal Reserve and say, here's $100, give me whatever, like gold or stuff. But you can spend it in the economy. Right. What happens when you spend a lot of money in the economy? Well, inflation rates rise, and that's what the central banks are supposedly supposed to target. So even though you can't redeem it directly in the central bank system, you can redeem it indirectly for goods and services, and vote with your dollars that you don't want to hold these dollars. Or, just buy Bitcoin, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we do now is we buy Bitcoin and we arbitrage it. That's what I do. I mean, it's treated me very, very well. And, I'm definitely, a Bitcoin standard bearer. And I think it's our next best hope. But I also, I don't rule out the reemergence of a gold standard, to the point that I actually would not be surprised that relatively soon, and by that I mean maybe within a generation, a lot of governments, they'll be forced to go back to sound money, And gold works for governments because governments have national borders. Gold has borders. It's occupied space, and so, and the whole thing is, the most bearish thing that could happen to Bitcoin is going to be if countries begin to adopt a gold standard. So it'll be really interesting to see. You're going to have all of these Bitcoiners that no longer want sound money because it's not their sound money. That would be
I don't have a problem with that. Like, this is what
I don't either.
Any can. I love this. Like, I want the monetary competition to be there, and then consumers and businesses can use.
Well, and that's what I see is the big innovation of what I see, and maybe I'm wrong in this vision, but what I see is that Bitcoin is that key that's apart from the nation states that will, because we have it and it's borderless and it has this limited supply, it will have it's the mechanism to keep the gold standard honest. So it won't, what happened this last time will not be repeated, at least in the same way. It might be repeated, but it's going to be a whole lot different. I just think that Bitcoin gives strength to the gold standard. It's going to make it more legitimate. And because Bitcoiners, like right now, there's a big flight going on in the United States. People are looking, you know what? I don't want to be in the United States anymore. I don't want to live in California. We're in the Baja. I kind of call this place where we have the first station of the Underground Railroad. People are coming, and we're getting people to visit us all the time, because, because we have more freedom here. We just do. I'm down here, and, we're free down here in the Baja. It's like the Wild West. It is like, it's Bitcoin country, and the people are that way. And we just went out to dinner last night and they agreed completely. Baja, they almost don't consider themselves part of Mexico.
Really?
Well, it's an isolated peninsula, They
have their own way of doing business.
Yeah, they have their own way.
They even have their own exchange rate.
Yeah, but they have a different exchange rate, everything. It's like, it's not Mexico, it's Baja. And
you're just left alone by the government.
So
that's amazing.
Right. So
it's funny that you mentioned that too, because I read another article a few weeks ago called "Escape Hatches." When I was trying to sort of trying to connect exactly those two things: migration to get out of a state here and there, or a system that isn't working for you, or Bitcoin to get out of a monetary system that isn't working for you. And both those two kind of had to go together. And I was discussing some of the examples from World War II, where some Jews from had property or had some wealth or whatever, managed to get their gold, sell stuff, get their gold to Switzerland, from Austria, from Germany, or from wherever. They saw the writing on the wall, and they tried to get out. They managed to get their money out, but they didn't get their physical being out. They didn't get themselves to get out. So we sort of like,
wow, so they got their money out, but not them. Well, that's what I say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the infamous story of Swiss.
Well, that's I've said that all along. It said they might have you, but you can't get your wealth out. They got you.
Yeah, you need to think about both of those things. This comes up in the Bitcoin community too. Somebody can put a gun to your head, and you can memorize you can be as private as you want, and memorize your words and whatever. But at some point, with a gun to your head and enough torture, you're going to come up. And so you need to sort of think of both of those things. You can't think that the monetary system alone is going to save us. I agree with you that it puts a check on what excessive and authoritarian governments can do, and it sort of helps us, maybe points us towards a more sound money world. But you also need to think about the physical aspect, the migration part, which I really like. You can sort of need to try to get second passports here and there, and that's also a thing. Like, well, no, I want to opt out. This is what we see from internally in the U.S. right now, when everyone's moving away from California, away from New York, towards slightly freer states. And I'm envisioning the same thing on a global scale. People don't want to be in places that don't work for them. They opt just the same way you opt out from the U.S. dollar, you can opt out from the government.
And that's the way the pendulum is swinging now. But there'll be a day when the government's going to wake up. Wow, I wonder what happens if we have sound money. Now all of a sudden they have sound money. You have a friendly tax environment, And all of a sudden, well, yeah, I feel safe. I'm gonna choose your jurisdiction now, and my wealth is out there in cyberspace. It doesn't have it's not sitting now. And the whole thing is, I pay my taxes, whatever jurisdiction I'm in. Mexico, my wife pays. I still am a U.S. resident, but my trading, I pay U.S. taxes in the U.S. Mexico, likes people to bring money in, which I do.
Right.
After I pay the tax in the U.S. And so now we're setting up businesses here, and it. I think. Go ahead.
It's sort of that's part of the article that you're working on right now, right? Jurisdictional arbitrage.
Yeah,
it's the thing. It's the reason that I'm here instead of in the UK, where I be forced
Bitcoin is trading about $4,000 or $5,000 higher here.
Well, it's not that. That's not why. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I don't want to be locked up in my
Bitcoin,
house, right?
Around the world, you sell it in Mexico. You can. I mean, you're limited to your KYC and how you set it up and all that. I used to the goat lady and I. We used to run. Do it. I used to do like 40 Bitcoin a week when the price was lower. Now we don't do it. I'm reteaching people that. I said, look, there's no reason if you're in Bitcoin not to find a jurisdiction where you can arbitrage, and if you don't. The maximum I can do right now is 100,000 a month, but if you only have 10,000, you just have to make 10 trips instead of one. But you can still do it. It's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's not. You got to set it all up. I mean, you have to comply with everybody's rules, but it's there. But it's not sitting behind your desk. Trying to play the market swings. You're actually arbitraging, and you're bringing the market. You're closing the gaps between the markets, and that's what happens. So it's not always
this
that
isn't new,
huh?
Right?
No.
This is what I mentioned. I lived in Argentina in 2012, and Argentina is a typical monetary basket case country in decades. And at that time, it was kind of like going well, which by Argentinian standards means 40% inflation instead of 500% inflation. And we had this exact same thing, but with a better money. But the better money was US dollars, right? You had the black market US dollar rate way above the official rate. And anytime I left the country or I entered the country and I wanted to pay with dollars or I had some dollars, everyone's eyes was shine up. I want to pay my.
Why is inflation so high? Yeah. Why is inflation so high in Argentina? Are they highly socialist, or is it just padding the bureaucrats' pocketbooks? Or what? Why? They just always have had a high inflation.
At Argentinian economic history, and I haven't looked at this in detail, but they have a lot of problems with with the trust in their system, their central banks, and they have a lot of problems with money printing. And it's this is sort of what I mean with people can respond, like the government or the central bank can print as much money as they want, but people respond by just dishing it. I don't want it. I'm going to spend it on whatever I can to get rid of it. I don't want to hold it, and then you get this sort of hyper velocity, very very quick spending of the new money that they spent, and everybody flees for better money, which in Argentina in 2012 meant dollars, and still does in a lot of places. Like Venezuelans, they probably use, I don't know too much about that, but they do use Bitcoin from time to time. But even more so, they want dollars, right?
Right. No, I get it. Well,
and I mean, I don't think that's a competition to Bitcoin or anything. It's just an indication that you go from a worse money to a better money if you have the chance. And dollars happen to be a better money than bolivars or Argentinian pesos.
Yeah, it's changing. The peso's been relatively strong here compared to the dollar, and I don't know if that's going to continue or not. But Mexico's so close, tied so close to the U.S. economy. Mm-hmm. Although, hopefully, I think that I see nothing but more and more people, moving down this way to avoid, what's going on in the U.S. now. But we shall see. Well, we're having a conference here in August, on the 12th and 13th, and then we're going to have an adventure tour on the 14th and 15th. And I want to invite you to speak at our conference if you can make it. If you can open up that calendar, I think it'd be a great contribution. And you might get shouted down on the platform by some real. I don't think so. These are pretty good guys, but we'll get there with Giacomo Zucco will be there, Jimmy Song, Tone Vase, Knut. I don't know if you read Knut's any of his books, but he's going to be there.
I think so. And but yeah, it's the kind of nuanced view that I think is missing in a lot of the Bitcoin community.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be hostile.
No, that's what I liked about it. But I understand the reaction you got because I kind of get those vibes. It's just I'm much more I really love Bitcoin, as you can tell by my hat. But when I read your article, I said, oh, this guy gets it and you weren't afraid to get out there and mention names and then referred. Here's what I'm talking about, and I said, "Oh, I see what and I agree with a lot of this stuff. We're just a little bit too hard headed, and a little bit what I think we got to really embrace Hayek, and he talks about this pretense of knowledge, and we all tend to have it when we think we know something. I don't know very much. The little bit I know, I hope I know well. That's kind of the way I view it. So, and some other news here. I just got signed up. I'm going to be in Miami here soon. Is that right? Do you know when that is, Stefan?
21st to 23rd of April. I think. Let me double check on that.
So
this is the event everyone's talking about, the Miami Bitcoin event.
Are you going to be there or what?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't gonna go, but then I got informed. Well, then they kind of asked me and kept asking me. I said, well, because I just don't want to travel too much, and I don't like to travel unless the goat lady goes with me. And so, but she wants to go to. She's never been to Miami. Oh yeah, I want to go. So okay, that makes it a lot easier. But yeah, we're really going to try and make this the event for Bitcoin standard bearers. We actually got the domain name, the Bitcoin Standard Conference. So that's pretty cool. I can't believe that domain was available. So, if let me know, because I think our calendar is pretty full. On speaker,
I think we might be able to squeeze in one or two more. I think.
Well, yeah, and I kind of there's a couple people if they have said no, but if they change their mind, I'm sure we'd open and make sure they.
Right. Yeah.
But everybody has. But it's already going to be a great, and the format's going to be just like the conference is only going to be for 6 hours. Everybody talks for 30 or 40 minutes with questions and for less than an hour. And it starts from noon till 6, and the rest of the time.
That's not what this is about.
What?
Our conference, this interview.
Oh, I'm plugging. I thought I'm supposed to plug my stuff.
We plug our stuff 24/7. I want to listen to what this guy has to say.
Well, I know he's really good, but he's not an income stream. I think we're not paying him, but he's certainly not paying us. I don't know.
You're welcome to pay me. I don't know.
But we certainly want to give you more of a platform because I read your article. Oh, maybe you need to show that on the screen. The article that I'm talking about is American Institute for Economic Research. They put out a lot of good stuff. There's a couple other authors there that I really like. There's some old gold bugs there, and I wanted to get them on sometimes because they kind of have a political view and
we have a great mix of people. A lot
you
of
do.
people joining us.
Yeah.
We have old people from the old people, established professors and people who've been in the game for decades and decades. And then we also have a lot of up and coming voices like Ethan Jang and other people like myself
Yeah, and my thing is they sponsor people too. It's like they'll invite you to come and just hang out with them for the summer. How does that work?
Yeah, I was a visiting scholar there in 2018, 2018 I think, 2018 and 2019. And they have a beautiful mansion in western Massachusetts, a big old house that I think Harvard probably had a lot to do with. I don't know the story exactly.
Yeah, it's a long story.
It's a long story, and many people know this much better than me. And they invite you to come there, and they have rooms, and I think there's there 20, 30 rooms. They give people a lot of. I think they bought a new house too to house more people who wanted to come visit. They advertise for postdocs and others who want to come spend time there and do research. They have great facilities, and it's beautiful nature. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, in the middle of the Berkshires. Beautiful, beautiful forests, mountains, and things.
Yeah.
So you apply. I don't know exactly the process. I'm not involved in that. But then they invite you to come. You can stay there for I think up to 3 months or more, if longer periods. So a lot of scholars are doing that.
Yeah, and UCR were just, like I say, he was so respected because he really, he was a big believer in sound money. And of course, he got people into gold through Switzerland. And the United States government, of course, didn't like it. Everything he was doing was perfectly legal. And if you kind of read the story, he was just very fortunate they were unable to seize all of his assets, and they went to court. The court process just lasted for years, and the judge finally says, "Why are you hassling this man? He's done nothing wrong." And so that's where he really he wasn't just an economist. He was he also lived a certain way. And that's what that's how I remember him. And so that's how he's
he died before I was born, I think. I've heard a lot of stories. About him and from his relatives who are still involved in the institute.
Right.
There are a lot of people there who of the staff who've been working there for 30, 40, 50 years, and they still have stories about him.
No, he was a very great man. He had a great, and I like your boldness, Joakim. And that's what else is. I said, man, I like this guy because he's because you're trying to engage, and we should be able to engage and and do this. It's not these things are not settled by any means.
No, and I think we learn a lot when we take a little positions that are a little more extreme than we think we can get away with. And then we sort of get a good conversation between people, and it's like we can examine each other's arguments and figure out what it is that means, and we can learn a lot from that. So I like to take a little out of the box argument and try to go with them, even if I can't really prove it, or if I think I'm 100% right, then I'll take a controversial position and see if it flies and see what I learn from it. And it's sort of like nice conversations that I was partly missing in the university world.
Right. Well, I agree with that. That's kind of the wonderful thing. What I was locked up for over a decade, and when I got out and when I went into Bitcoin, I was amazed at how far along, the thinking in Austrian economics is compared to what it was in 1980. It just blew me away.
It's a different world.
Yeah, completely different world. And I don't think that people really understand how lonely it was back then. It was really alone. Von Mises was, I think he was employed by Fee Foundation, and I remember he came, my father actually sponsored him, and they had a Fee seminar that I got dragged to, but I remember listening to this man, and I was maybe 14 or 15 years old and could care less, but I sit there and looked at this man and just listened to him. And I was kind of in awe. He could speak, and I understood what he was talking about. He had a thick German accent and this big old head. Anyway, it was very, very...
He has this line in his memoirs that are just perfect when he's talking about that he set out, I don't know exactly what it is. It's something like he set out to be a reformer or a monetary something, but he ended up being the historian of decline.
Being a what?
The historian of decline.
Historian of decline.
Yeah. I mean, the guy lived through, the most horrible events of the 20th century, and escaping Nazis twice, and came to the US and was broke, and tried to make a living from that. And he had all these amazing ideas and all this amazing research and writing that get done. And he wasn't really taken seriously, and struggled to get a position.
He wasn't. He was not taken seriously at all.
Yeah.
And so it was not until, the next generation that just kind of rediscovered him. And, that was it. So, wow, it just, where we've gone, it's amazing. So, all right, well, anything else you want to cover, Stefan? You say I'm just glad to be doing this because there's very few times that I've been able to even have a conversation like this because you almost get dismissed as a heretic, and so I'm looking forward to seeing the things that you come up with. I don't know if I'm going to buy into your fractional reserve, but I certainly. The thing that I like about Harwood, for the first time, I understood how a market could regulate this money supply, and that's what I get out of the art of commercial banking. So the next step you're gonna have to persuade me on, but
yeah, the market can do banking, the market can do money.
Yeah. So, and I like to say, guys, I'm of the opinion, I might be wrong. The hope is, particularly you Bitcoiners, if we are going to be our own banks, we're going to have to learn to act like bankers. And you may not want to be a banker, and maybe you don't have to be, but if you don't, then you need to find somebody who is a good banker or several other banks that can do it. The most important thing is just do whatever you do very well and be a producer in society. Because if you're producing something, then a banker can create money that represents what you're producing, and he can give you a credit so you can pay your producers, you can pay your employers, and because otherwise, if we don't do that, you have to have that financing mechanism to launch, a new enterprise. It has to be there, and to think that it's going to work without that engine is just, to me, nonsense. It's 100% gold standard or 100% Bitcoin standard is going to take us back to a very primitive society. If we're going to sustain Western civilization, we're going to need banking. And what that is what this generation is going to have to rediscover. And it does create it's like, I wrote a quick article. People say, "What? That's way off point." But I wrote it on, know your customer is necessary for business. You got to know. If you're in business, you need to know your customers. You need to know your suppliers. There's nothing wrong with KYC. What's wrong is I'm KYCing and supplying the information to the government. I'm spying on you, but us volunteering information to each other, that's just good business, and so KYC is a great thing. It's just when you nationalize it, it's not.
Yeah, I'm sort of the perfect example of that, right? I've just been charged for money laundering for doing peer-to-peer Bitcoin transactions, and if I hadn't KYC'd, my clients, I might be in big trouble. But thankfully, I've got all the information I need to prove that it wasn't money laundering. But if I hadn't collected that information, I would be screwed.
Yeah, but then they can grab it without subpoenaing it. You're supposed to, or turn it into them voluntarily.
Yeah, that way they got a nice.
Okay.
I sent them a nice letter saying, if a court orders me to give you the papers, you can have them.
Exactly.
Until then, they're mine.
Right. That's the way it should be.
That's
not the way it is anymore. So. All right. Well, anything you want to add to this? I'm really looking forward to your future work. I do recommend, guys, if you start reading Joakim, some of his work, he's going to take you for a deep dive because he refers to every all of his stuff is very well researched, and of course I love the articles on American Institute are well done. I like Medium for the same reason that you guys have at American Institute. You can link everything to it. It's really a new way of writing, and I that's really I really like that new feature in reading that we can you can write an article and link to your references rather than have footnotes at the end. Although you have lengthy footnotes too, I noticed.
Yeah, sometimes. But yeah, you can find a lot of my articles on the American Institute for Economic Research. I have a site there. I'm also on Twitter fighting with Bitcoiners. Something like that. At Joakim Book, Joakim Book.
All right, well, fight with this guys. We want to have the contentious, but don't block him.
Blocking never ever helped in creating a healthy debate.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be a nice guy. Let's have a good conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you're kind of crappy at that. You're a nice guy.
I think he does better than I do, and anyway.
Well, he does better than me too. Plus he clean. He's not old and ugly, so yeah. So how old are you? You're a youngster here. Can I ask you?
30 this year.
Oh, wow. So you are definitely the young one of the bunch.
All right. Well, that's good.
I'm gonna say that I'm fully grown now. Almost past prime.
Well, we're older, but we're not fully grown.
Yeah, we're certainly not fully grown.
At least not grown up.
All right.
But yeah, it was good having you. So I'm sorry about the bit of the technical difficulties in the beginning. We were working on half of our equipment.
It was 5 a.m. here for us, so we don't usually do it at this time. But we wanted to do it at this time because we know we hit Europe and we hit the East Coast, and California at the time is the worst time in the world.
And for anyone who's listening, if there's been a bit of audio trouble, don't worry, we've got the recording here, so I'll re-upload that right as soon as we're done here. And yeah.
Yeah, we have editing equipment, so I really appreciate you getting on with us, and I hope we can do it again. And I hope you can let me know if you can make space for us at our conference here. I think you'd have a blast, and we need somebody to come and stir the pot a little bit anyway. So
absolutely.
It was a pleasure.
And let's just plug.
Yeah.
Plug your credentials one last time. This is Joakim Book from American Institute of Economic Research.
And the one that I started, the one that turned me on was that one. I really like that picture you have of that circular clock. I don't know who designed that.
Yeah, I know what it is. It's staircase or clock.
Did you find that?
No, I didn't. We have some really amazing digital marketing people at AAR, and they find it amazing.
That's really, I really like that picture.
There's some Salvador Dali-ish over it.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, yep. So yeah, check out your work on.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on Harwood, because he could have made it better. Okay, I'll make it. Explain that. Resurrect the sound commercial banking for us. So the guy is right. Yeah, the reason I like it, that was the first article. I mean, he's hard to read a lot of times, but that was one article that I thought was very easy to read, and it was the first time I was like, I finally get it. Yeah, that's not inflationary at all. I said, I get it. You can create non-inflationary purchasing media, and the market is actually increasing and decreasing that money supply. You're not a monetarist. That's why, I don't know, Milton Friedman wanted to fix supply. Everybody has their own little monetary theory. And, so.
I think this is the first step. Once you get this, it's not a big jump to accepting fractional reserve banking. It's not that big of a leap.
No, we just
don't be afraid of it.
We just need to get the stigma. I grew up
with it, and it worked for a long, long time. So I'll wait for your article. Persuade me. I'm not going there yet. Okay, I'm certainly not 100% reservist. Let's put it that way. That's no. All right, so. Well, thank you for coming, and looking forward to your work. You're going to be writing a whole lot more in the future. Hopefully, we've given you a little platform to launch your intellectual career, because I like anybody that stirs the pot.
Well, we'll definitely have you on again a day where the tech isn't driving me crazy, so I can listen a bit better. Because I really want to. I really want to hear more about this stuff. It's really interesting. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, guys.
Oh, you got to make a fool out of yourself.
Yeah.
I do this little dance. What I teach is hodl, Okay, and that is we hodl our Bitcoin. It could be gold too, but Bitcoin works a little bit better. Hodl, then we save, which means as you hodl and you reward yourself. You take your wife out to dinner. My wife likes big trucks, so she's getting a new GM truck right now. And then the last thing to do is we build it, and build it is like the set, and and so we're doing something. And what I'm teaching now is 2 years ago I started this website. I had 10 Bitcoin. I said, okay, I'm going to risk 10 Bitcoin and start Ugly Old Goat. I'm going to publish my trades. Nobody had done that before because I'm a pretty good trader. I knew I could do it. And so I published all my trades in real time. People said, no, this isn't after the fact or anything. And I got, at that time, 10 Bitcoin was only $35,000. But I've got a membership enough where, I don't make any money at this, but it's my passion. I love doing it. So now here we are going to the next level. I'm risking another 10 Bitcoin now to expand. But guess how much that 10 Bitcoin's worth? That's about $600,000. So I'm but it does work. So
between us, we're doing what? $1 million?
Yeah, and he's putting in another. So we're well over $1 million on this project we're going. We don't know where we're going with it. So we need all the help we can get. So, so what we do is we just follow us in our dance. Here's what I do. And if you notice, it's not Bitcoin, it's sound money. Because Bitcoin is sound money in my mind, but so is gold. I don't have a problem with gold. I'm one of the few that embraces both. So we go hodl, 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 save, 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 build it, sound money, and then I got my little staffs. That's the Ugly Old Goat back there.
So basically, what he's saying is he wants you to do it with him now.
Yes, because I picked up. Look, I did not call you the monetary nerd. You called yourself that in the last article. So that's who you are now, and I really think you needed to give that moniker. But you actually do look the role too. I mean, like if I was in a vision and a monetary nerd is just what Joakim Book. That's what he is.
You're just trying to offend people all over the place.
No, well, if I can be ugly.
No. I need the Steven Pinker look.
There you go.
Yeah, they put a tinfoil hat on me back there. So.
All right, well, are you up for it?
Ready? Here we go. Make it full.
Let's do it.
Here we go.
Where do I start, left or right?
Left. You start on the left. Ready? Here we go. Hodl, hodl, hodl. Save. Build a. Sound money. All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for coming on, Joakim. Hope to see you again soon.
Same.